Hey everyone, welcome to the pilot episode of this podcast. I'm Xavier.
I'm Deja.
And today we're going to talk about some random nonsense.
Yeah.
Why are you laughing?
It's the radio voice.
What radio voice? This is how I talk.
Welcome to the podcast.
Okay, well, whatever.
Okay, so we can segue into the Cyberpunk stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So here we go. Now we're going to talk about CD Projekt Red and Cyberpunk2077. Are you ready?
Yeah.
So I've actually prepared. I have this whole write-up.
Okay.
I'm actually kind of excited. I learned a lot.
Okay.
So have you ever heard of CD Projekt Red?
No.
Outside of me mentioning it?
No.
All right. So first we're going to talk about the history of CD Projekt Red, right?
Okay.
And
is this the company that made the game?
This is the company that made Cyberpunk, yeah. So CD Projekt Red is a Polish game development studio whose consumer-friendly policy has, or had, we'll come back to that, earned it a special place in the hearts of its fans, right? So what I mean by that is to say that, like, people like love CD Projekt Red.
Okay.
They have like a cult following, I guess, almost.
What other games have they released?
We'll get into it.
Okay.
Okay. So, but first let's talk about their history, right?
Okay.
So, the company was established all the way in the 90s. Mm-hmm. They actually didn't start as a game development studio. They started as a games retailer. And how that worked is basically these two high school friends decided that they wanted to, I guess, sell more games in Poland, which before they existed didn't have any like real connection to the games industry.
Okay.
Like people still played video games from what I can tell, but there were no like
big companies coming out of Poland, right?
Exactly.
Right.
So what they would do is they would order discs from abroad and sell them at something called the Warsaw Computer Bazaar. Now, I spent the Warsaw Computer Bazaar. Okay. Warsaw's a place. Yeah. It's like a city.
Yeah.
I could not, for the life of me, find any good information on what that is. But based on what I saw, it seems like it was an underground black market for, like, discs, basically.
Okay.
So that's why they're CD Projekt Red, because they're a CD project, yeah. Right? So they did that starting in, like, the, I want to say, mid-90s. And by 2002... they had expanded to the point where they were able to move into other business areas. Mm-hmm. And they had always wanted to start a game development company, and they were already selling games. Mm-hmm. So at this point, they're basically like a retailer or a distributor. Okay. And they say, let's just make a game. And they begin the work on their first title. Do you want to guess what it is?
Cyberpunk.
No. The Witcher.
What?
They begin work on the first Witcher game, right? At the time, it was the most expensive Polish video game to ever be produced.
So they released it like it happened.
Yeah, it happened. So it took them years. I want to say 5-6 years it took them, but they released the first Witcher. I'm sorry, no, I wrote it down. Look at me. The game was released in 2007. So 5 years. I got it in the first try. And from what I could tell, granted, I never played the first Witcher. I wasn't really, I was alive, but I would have been like, I was in high school, but I just didn't have the game.
Right.
And it seems that they received it positively. All of the, like, again, it was a while ago, and I'm not a professional reporter or anything. So everything I found was kind of like retrospectives.
Right.
But basically, they said is the thing that really stood out to them at the time was how good the story was, basically. Right, yeah. Like, the gameplay was, of course, there, but that's not why you go to The Witcher 1.
Right.
So, moving forward in their history, do you want to guess what they're going to do next?
They're going to try to make another game.
Wrong. In 2008...
Oh, okay. Excuse me.
In 2008, the company established the website GOG. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Okay, so this was really crazy for me because GOG, I don't know if it's a huge deal, but I've used it before. Mm-hmm. And what it is it's a distribution platform for games and I think some software. But the thing that makes GOG special is that it's mostly DRM free. Do you know what a DRM is?
No. This is
no. This got like so much more happened in this project than I ever thought would happen.
Okay.
So basically, I'm pretty sure you've actually experienced DRM before. So like with iTunes, you know how iTunes will say you can have all this music, but it's only registered to this one device?
Yeah.
And if you lose that device, it's like a huge hassle. Yeah, you can't get it back. That's DRM.
Okay.
It's basically a system to try and protect copyright. So basically, if you buy something, you can't just give someone else a copy of the file because the file is tied to your device. Okay. That's what DRM exists to do.
Gotcha.
CD Projekt Red with GOG said, no, we're not doing that. You buy the thing, it's like you have a physical copy. It's like if you bought a disc. You can just
give it,
yeah. And that's part of the reason people like them so much is because they have an incredibly customer-friendly policy most of the time. But there are some like scruples that come with that.
Okay.
But just put a pin in that.
Yeah.
So that's 2008. They released GOG, and apparently they must have been in production of The Witcher 2 shortly after this happened or while it was happening.
Okay.
Because in 2008, they released GOG, and then in 2011, they released The Witcher 2. Right. So that's the one with... You played Witcher 3, right?
Yeah.
So the main story in Witcher 2 is, you remember Letho?
Yeah.
He kills a king, basically.
Oh, okay.
And it causes all this crazy nonsense.
Which is why in The Witcher 3, he's on the run.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Right. So that's one of the main storylines in Witcher 2. And I think I played some of it, but I never finished it because I didn't own it.
Right.
The Witcher 2 did incredibly well. And by 2012, they were able to announce that they had sold over 2 million copies.
Okay, big ballin'.
Yeah. And so later that year, the company would announce Cyberpunk 2077.
The one that just came out?
Yes. In 2012, that's when they announced Cyberpunk 2077.
That makes the news that I've been hearing about it so much more painful.
Yep, exactly. But we're gonna... Yeah, because I remember that release, right? Because I was, I think, just graduating high school and getting ready to go into college. Yeah, that's how long ago that was.
That's such a long time. I mean, I know that, like, a couple years, I would always hear, oh, push back, but, like...
Well, see, here's the thing. Here's the thing. If you... We're going to keep talking about it, but let's just move on. Because I want to get through all of it, and then I can talk about how I feel about it.
Right.
So the idea behind Cyberpunk 2077 is that it's going to be an open world game exploring the world of cyberpunk. And this is kind of sticky because cyberpunk is a genre, but it's also a specific product. So cyberpunk is like, you know what steampunk is?
No. Is that
you don't
music?
know what steampunk is?
What is that?
Okay, so steampunk is like...
Why would I know what that is?
How do you not know? Okay. So steampunk is like... We're going to have to use the computer for this. And this is excellent radio. But so steampunk is like... It's a certain aesthetic. It's when you mix like Victorian era London...
it's a style of dress?
With like... Sort of... It's a setting. So like... It's like if you mix Victorian era London with like high tech. It's like if you achieved high tech with steam power instead of with the stuff that we have now. So you have stuff like automatons and robots.
Do you know what this looks like? This looks like how they try to like set up Korra, like how the people in Korra look.
Yeah, Korra was like a soft steampunk situation. Cyberpunk is like that, but instead of steam being the core and like Victorian era being the core,
steam, we literally mean steam?
Steam, yeah.
Okay.
But cyberpunk is like, so if you take that, the two elements of steampunk are Victorian era and steam power, right?
Gotcha.
And if you take that and you go the far future and like digital technology, that's cyberpunk.
Okay. So
cyberpunk has like this how how do I put it? It's like if we were far in the future, but also it was still the 80s. Ugh. You see what I mean? Like, that's kind of the aesthetic of it.
Okay, I get it.
And it existed at the time as a pen and paper tabletop game.
Really?
Yeah. So the writer is a guy by the name of Mike Pondsmith, and he actually was a consultant on the game.
Okay.
And he's been a game designer for a long time. That's him.
That's a black dude.
Yeah, that's Mike.
Wow, was not expecting that.
Yeah, so he's the guy who developed Cyberpunk. He's been developing tabletop games for like
pour one out for my man
years.
Mike. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I couldn't find his opinions on the release. I guess I didn't look that hard, but still. So he developed the pen and paper system for Cyberpunk, and he was a consultant on the video game,
gotcha.
Which again was announced in 2012.
Right.
So moving forward to the next step in the history of CD Projekt Red, they released The Witcher 3 in 2015.
Okay, so they're kind of on a roll.
So while they're producing, I guess at this point they're big, because keep in mind, I think, and I wouldn't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure that they're the biggest game developer in Poland. Like, maybe easily.
Okay.
So they're at a point, apparently, where they can develop two big projects side by side.
Right.
So in 2015, they released The Witcher 3. Now, you played The Witcher 3, and so did I, actually.
Fantastic game.
However, what I didn't know is that we both played it way after launch. And launch Witcher 3 is much different from end product Witcher 3.
Really?
So, at the launch of
Whoa. So that means people who played it immediately after launch played a different game?
Yeah, in some ways.
Okay.
So it's going to make sense once I explain it. So, at launch, The Witcher 3 was full of glitches. Like, it was not broken, but like, you had stuff like people would T-pose randomly. The horses would merge together.
What is a T-pose?
It's literally... Hang on, Deja. Oh my goodness.
Listen, I'm not... You're using terminology.
Okay, so here's a T-pose.
Oh, so literally...
Yes, it's exactly what it sounds
like. So like when it gets stuck.
So yeah, so why that happens is when you're doing a 3D model, that's the default pose. So you can see the most of it. So sometimes when the code messes up, they just revert to that pose and they'll like slide around in the T-pose. So people would T-pose, horses would merge. Let me see if I can find some early glitches.
Not horses would merge. Wow, we love that sound of the keyboard.
Yeah, got a little ASMR in there for you. Yeah, so there's the horse. He's like lost his skin and you can just see
terrifying.
His eyes. Yeah. And stuff like this would happen. Like you would just do stuff like that. I'm not sure what really.
Okay,
yeah, stuff
wait.
that would happen.
I'm gonna sidetrack for a second though, because I thought there were like steps in like creating games. Aren't there people who like test it before they release it?
Yeah, that's a part of the problem. So what happens with CD Projekt Red, and this is a thing that kind of went over my head and maybe went over a lot of people's heads. What appears to be happening is that CD Projekt Red really wants to make really good games. Like the developers on staff do anyway.
Right.
Because their games end up being very good. So like it was released with all these glitches and it went to reviewers like that. Mm-hmm. And the reviewers took it, played it, and gave them like a 9 out of 10 or even a 10 out of 10. Because they could tell that like there was a good game in there, if that makes sense.
So they just ignored all that stuff.
Right, because the glitches aren't constant. Like they just happen like you're playing the game and then it'll glitch. Right. So it's not like the game is unplayable, and the stuff when it works, they were like, this is really good when it works. And again, because The Witcher, I should have mentioned this at the start. The Witcher is actually based on a series of fantasy novels, also called The Witcher.
Right. Yeah.
But what they did was, rather than just porting over the book, they made their own story within that world to kind of like add to it.
Yeah. Okay.
So The Witcher has a really interesting world, but they also have really good writers for the games because it's not like they're just copying the writer's story, if that makes sense. So again, their story was incredible for The Witcher 3. I mean, you played The Witcher 3. Yeah. People really liked the story. I think that's for good reasons. And also the gameplay was mostly intact. I've been told that The Witcher 3 at launch, the movement was really bad and they had to completely change that. But, and this is another reason that people really like CD Projekt Red, is they kept patching the game until it was fixed. And now, granted, this process apparently took several months. So the game that you and I played is like closer to what they got like 6 months down the road.
Okay.
And then on top of that, they released 16 free DLC bundles. I guess like almost
as even make money,
like an apology. Well, because the game still sold, like people still bought it.
Yeah, but 16?
It's a lot of money. Like imagine if you sold 2 million of anything. If you charged 50 cents, that's still $1 million.
Yeah, that's
and it
true.
wasn't 50 cents. So well, I don't know what the profit margins on that is, but still, it's a lot of money. So they made 16 free DLCs, and then they made 2 paid expansions.
Okay.
However, the expansions together, I want to say, cost about $40, and it's like 30 hours of content.
You said that like it was a bad thing. Is that a bad thing?
No, it's a good thing.
Oh, you said however. I'm like, that sounds like a great deal.
Yeah, it's so they're, like I said, they're really good about having customer-friendly policies.
Okay.
So I actually wrote a paragraph here. I'll just read that. So the combination of free DLC releases and the general quality of the game after it had been patched created the impression that the developers of CD Projekt Red were committed to creating a quality experience, and ultimately, the release of Witcher 3 seems to have generated more goodwill for the company rather than ruin its reputation.
You better summarize.
So, and that's basically it. Is like what happened is they, instead of people hating them, people looked at the way that they came back from that catastrophe and they ended up with more goodwill in their bank.
Okay.
And so I guess I should probably talk about what people think is happening with CD Projekt Red, because when I start talking about Cyberpunk 2077, you're going to see a lot of parallels to the Witcher 3 release. And basically what people think is happening is they're making this game, right? And the developers are doing whatever they have to do to make it the best game they can.
Okay.
However, the shareholders are saying, listen, this game has to be at X time and it has to come out at X price. Right? So the problem with that is if the shareholders come to these people and they say, we need this game by, let's say June.
Right.
We need this game by June. And the developers say, we can't do it by June. The shareholders are in a position where they can just say...
Pull money, right?
Huh?
Well, they can pull money from the project, can't they?
I mean, they could, but typically what they do is say, no, you're getting it to me by June. Because if they pull money, if they shut down the project...
It's
then,
over. Right.
Right, then they don't get anything either. So this happens to me in my job sometimes.
Right.
I work in IT. So what'll happen is they'll say, we need this many servers by this day. And the team lead will say, that's not possible. And they'll say, do it anyway, because some people are like that, I guess. And so what happens is they end up releasing a game that is good because the team is still very talented.
Right.
Like, they can make a good game. It's just not finished.
Okay, but my thing is, they've been working on it since, you said 2012?
Yeah. It takes a long time to make.
I get it. It takes a long time to make. And wasn't it supposed to be open world, kind of?
Yeah.
It takes a longer time to do that.
It takes a long time. Well, if you look at the difference, I mean, I guess it's double the usual time. But Cyberpunk was incredibly ambitious because part of the thing that they were advertising is that the city is like self-functioning. So basically, it's supposed to be like a living simulation of a city.
Gotcha.
And it kind of is. It's just that, again, the game is not done.
Right.
And the testing thing that you mentioned, there are people whose job it is to test it, but it's like that doesn't matter if they test it and the testers say this, and this needs to be fixed, and then someone else says, okay, we're shipping it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like it doesn't matter. So fast forward to the release of Cyberpunk 2077 in the year of our Lord, 2020. And this is when the delays actually start happening. And this was really interesting to me because I actually couldn't find any delays besides this year. So when Cyberpunk was initially advertised, again, in 2012, the release date that they advertised was just when it's ready, which is almost heartbreaking given what ended up happening.
Yeah, because it wasn't ready.
Right, and they released it anyway for whatever reason. So the initial release date was going to be April 16th, 2020. The game got delayed from April 16th to September 17th.
Okay.
Still of 2020. In June, the game was further delayed until November 19th.
Okay.
Then in October, the game was delayed for a final time to December 10th.
Right.
Which is when it finally came out.
Yeah.
Still incomplete. So, yeah.
I remember, like, it being... you keep track of stuff kind of, like, in the back of your mind. I remember it'd be, like, delayed. And I was like, oh, it's just going to keep getting delayed. And then I was like, it's out?
Yeah.
And people were, like, playing.
Yeah. Because they didn't actually... If you look at it, it got delayed, like, 6 months. April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. 8 months.
Right.
I mean, I didn't research, like, the history of game delays, but that's not even a year.
Yeah.
Like, it's a long time to be delayed, but for a AAA game, I could see it. Like, if stuff isn't working, it's going to take time to fix.
Right.
But the problem with that is because they kept delaying it's because the delays happened so, like, close to each other, it became very... it left a really negative opinion on people. And also, another part of the problem is, do you know what crunch time is?
I'm just going to say no.
Okay. So, crunch time is basically, I mean, it's exactly what it sounds like.
Like you're down to the last second.
Wire,
okay, yeah. I thought you were going to hit me with something way left from what I thought.
In the video games industry, crunch time is actually really infamous because what happens is you'll have people working, like, 14-hour days for months.
Wow.
Right. Like sweatshop conditions, except you're on a computer instead of at like a factory.
And probably also getting paid. Maybe. Really?
It depends. Like it really depends on the company, but you're getting paid, but it's not like you're getting paid overtime. Sometimes you're not getting like benefits or comp time or anything. It's just you just have to keep working. And God help you if you're salaried. You just have to hold the L.
Yikes, that's crazy. I always assumed that those environments were more like, you know how they portray Google to be? Yeah. I know everything isn't like that, but very much like, hey, here's some...
So what happens...
like, I don't know.
Giving people an healthcare in 2020. Are you kidding me? So what happens in the game industry is usually they take advantage of the fact that people who go to be game developers are usually very young and very passionate
about it.
And so they use that to basically coerce people into working these hours, which I watched a video that was really good, and God help me, I should have written it down. But basically what the guy says is he says that he interviews a couple of like game devs, and their general consensus of it is that because game developers tend to be very passionate, they're going to do crunch time even if you don't want them to. Like one of the people he interviewed ended up being a manager, and he was like in charge of managing projects and what people did, and he said that it came to a point where he had to start sending people home because you know how people get when they're really into something, they'll just work on it. And so crunch time is a thing that is part of the industry, but they will often use it to exploit people because you can only do that for so long before you start having like mental breakdowns. Like they have what they call stress casualties, which is where people work so hard that they can't come in for like 3 months. They just have like mental breakdowns.
That's crazy.
The symptoms are apparently akin to PTSD.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Okay, this is kind of like straying a little bit, but are there like team specifically for one game, or do people like work across different games? So like, let's say there's like a game company, or I guess, and they're working on game A.
Yeah.
And give me a position in a
game developer.
Yeah, you're the
senior UI developer.
Yeah, whatever. Okay. Right, you're them. And they're working on game A.
Yeah.
And game A is coming to the end, but then game B is at the middle stage. Does this person work on game A and B? Or are they just on one game at a time?
I think it depends. Again, I'm not an expert on this subject, but I have heard stories of people who, like, if you're working at a big company, you'll be, depending on, I guess, the size of the company, sometimes your job will be to do UI design for, like, 3 or 4 different games. But generally, I think you're just on a project.
Okay.
But
all right.
Again,
I just wanted
listeners take that with a grain of salt, because I don't know. That's just hearsay, basically.
Okay, so what went wrong with the game?
What went wrong with the game?
Was it just the glitches this time?
Literally, all the stuff that I described about Witcher 3 release, same thing. Like, sometimes, because I actually bought the game and played it in preparation for this.
Did you really?
Yeah.
You bought it on what?
On my computer.
Computer?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I played it. I mean, I need to know.
Yeah, but,
So, there's a lot of visual bugs.
Really?
Like, people will drop through the ceiling. I was doing an a mission where I had to ride in a car with someone, and I kept dying. And every time I would die, I would spawn, and it would slide me over into the seat with my partner.
Right.
So I would be, like, looking out of her skull. So I was, like, seeing her eyeballs? And, like, the sides of her hair. Because it wasn't like I was her character.
Yeah, you were,
my
like,
character was sitting inside of hers. Yeah. So sometimes you'll die randomly. Sometimes enemies will be invincible. So the game takes place in Night City.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But outside of Night City, there's like it looks almost like New Vegas. It's just like, not a savanna, but it's like dry, shrubbery kind of area.
Desert?
Yeah, but like with more greenery
Okay.
and more trees. And for the first 6 times I played the game, no matter where I went, I could always see the trees through all of the buildings.
Really?
Yeah. So, like, the buildings would, like, clip out and you could just see the trees in the background, even if you shouldn't have been able to.
That's crazy, because I'd, like, seen... I hadn't watched anyone play, because typically, I watch people play games or whatever, because I didn't anticipate that it would be this bad, so I'm thinking, well, I'm gonna get it.
Yeah.
And then I started seeing people, like, post stuff talking about, like, game-breaking bugs, or how they're quitting the Let's Play because they just can't handle it. This one guy, he tweeted how the game was just, like, a mess, and he was trying to get a mission to load, and it just wasn't available. And he had to, like, keep going back to it to try to get it to load up, and eventually he got it. But that's... And then...
Stuff like that.
Recently, the update that they took it off the store.
Yeah. Oh, they took it off the store?
Yeah, they took it off.
I thought they... See, I didn't
Sony,
even know that.
right? That's
yeah,
what they,
all I knew... Oh, yeah, Sony took it off the store.
Sony took it off the store.
Because they had some kind of dispute between CD Projekt Red and Sony. That I don't know a whole lot about. I wish I did. I just stopped researching after the initial.
Yeah.
But they also offered refunds for people in the PlayStation
I saw
store,
full refunds.
Yeah. Because it's like... And so here's the thing. Like, after playing the game, it's fun. Like, the combat feels good for the most part. There might be some balancing issues. Movement is really good. Because they do the thing where if you jump, you can, like, parkour onto stuff and climb up.
Yeah.
And the city is set in such a way that I often find a lot of ways to climb around things if I'm looking to do that.
Right.
They give you a ton of options for how you want to build your character, and they all legitimately seem like meaningfully different.
Right.
Leveling up, the way that that's done is, it's kind of like The Witcher. Like, you know how you would get your level and then you get your perk point? Okay, so that's still the same, but they've added another thing called street cred. And what street cred does...
Not street cred.
The Cyberpunk is... It's a way about that kind of stuff. Like, there's all this slang that I don't understand. And
like what?
choom. I have no idea what a choom is.
Okay.
Instead of business, they say biz. So it's that's a part of the setting, though. I agree that I think it's kind of lame, but like
very cringy.
It wouldn't be Cyberpunk if it wasn't like
right,
that. Right. Yeah. So street cred, how that works is, as you do missions, you get more street cred. It's like your reputation, basically.
Right.
And certain things you can't unlock unless your street cred hits a certain point. So in addition to you having to level up, you also have your street cred, which gives you other things. And on top of that, your skills level as you use them. So when you level up just broadly, like if you get enough experience points to reach level 12, you get an attribute point, which goes into like your strength or your stamina or whatever. And then you get a skill point, which goes into one of your skills. But then your skills also have like a use level. So like the more you shoot someone with a handgun, the more you'll level up your handgun
stuff.
And every time you hit another handgun level, you get another perk point that you can put anywhere. So because of all the way all those three things interact, it's like I never go more than maybe an hour without feeling like I'm getting a power boost.
Okay.
Because I'm constantly getting stuff. And then on top of that, you have cyberware. So what cyberware does is you can replace parts of your body with robot parts, basically.
Right.
So like with me, I'm doing a melee fist fighter. So I've replaced my arms with with a cyber upgrade that's called Gorilla Arms, which they're just robot arms, but they let you do more damage with your fists.
Right.
You can put mods in it so your fists do fire or lightning damage or whatever you want. And those just cost money. So basically it's another power spike that you can get tied to a completely different thing that isn't your level or your skills. It's just your money. I mean, so like there's always something that you could be.
Yeah. It sounds like towards. It was meant to be a really like good, like complex game.
Yeah.
But so did you finish? Did you finish the game?
I haven't beaten it.
Are you going to keep playing or are you like...
I'm going to wait because here's the thing. The story I don't think is as good as The Witcher's. That could just be me being dumb. But there's a lot of times where people are saying things and I'm just not following.
Right.
Like I went to do this one mission to help this lady named Panam. Who's she's one of the people in the game that you can work with to help. And I'm not going to spoil the story. But you can work with her to help you try to do what you're trying to do. And the way that you meet her is through a completely different lady who's what's called a fixer. And basically what they do is they just find jobs for people. So this fixer sends you to Pan Am. When you get to Pan Am, she tells you her old partner betrayed her. Following. That's fine. She calls her old partner and starts talking to him about how they're split up or whatever. And then someone else who's with you says, "Oh, you're betraying the fixer. That's bold of you." And I was just kind of sitting there like, I don't know like why this is a betrayal. Yeah. I don't remember. Is this a choice that I made? Is he talking about her or me? And there's a lot of stuff like that where people are just like, "Oh, this is huge. I can't believe you're doing that to this person." And I'm just like, just lost. Yeah. And I don't know if that's because of me or because of the way the game is written. But that being said, the story I'm up in the air about. Right. Because The Witcher can be like that too if you're not paying attention. So maybe that's what happened.
Yeah, it can be.
But yeah, overall, I feel like I'm getting to experience the Witcher release here because it's like the
same thing.
Yeah, and I can tell that there's like legitimately a pretty good game in there.
Have they like released a statement or anything?
I mean, they've released a couple of statements, but nothing like big,
groundbreaking.
But if I had to guess, the same thing's gonna happen. In a couple months, they're gonna patch everything, and it's gonna be a really good game. So like the issue is, I think that they should have just stuck to their guns initially when they said it's coming out when we're done with it.
I mean, but like you said, if there's somebody above them,
right,
who's like, now.
Yeah.
They can't really
There's nothing they can do
anything
but I guess that person should have stuck to their guns.
Yeah, that person probably isn't worried about the quality of the game.
Yeah,
as much as the
and
sales
ultimately I do kind of regret buying it.
Yeah.
Just because of crunch time was a huge thing. So the entire time they were delaying,
yeah,
they were in crunch mode.
For all those months?
Yeah, basically.
Oh man, those poor employees.
Exactly. So that's another thing where people were saying it, like looking up videos of people talking about the situation.
Yeah.
I heard from a lot of people that said, if it comes down to the health and well-being of these developers versus me getting this game by the end of the year, we can just wait.
Right.
And I got the sense that people didn't have the same negative reaction to the Witcher 3 release that they did to this one, even though I did see a little bit of evidence saying that the Witcher 3 had some crunch time issues happening too. But I think part of that problem is we're just in a different place right now with like things like workers' rights and whether or not it's viable or ethical or desirable to work people to the bone, basically.
Yeah.
At least mentally, anyway, for the sake of just having another product. And I think a lot more people are critical of that now. And I think that's part of the reason that people are so upset. Is they feel like, one, they didn't get the game they wanted because it's rushed out. And two, they didn't get the game they wanted and it's sacrificing the mental health.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Wow. That's crazy. Okay, so does that mean then for the months that they're probably patching this is also crunch time?
I can't prove that, but like
that's what
likely,
you would think.
Yeah, it's likely.
That's crazy.
Yeah. The game development industry is actually really
Cutthroat.
infamous. It's infamous for that. Just like any other passion industry.
It's a passion industry?
Yeah. That's a term that I made up. But like for example, you never hear someone going to school for game design just because they want to make money.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of like art or music or I guess I should say studio art, or music or sports in a way too, even though that's not like school.
Yeah.
But like you don't get people
who's
like, I want to play basketball.
Yeah, but also I know what you're saying. There's a whole lot of extra. They really gotta love it to even get to that.
It's not like just being an HR manager or just a random IT professional.
Shout out to the HR managers. Though.
Right. So maybe some people really love HR, but like not a whole lot of people. That's not something you list on things I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, that's Cyberpunk.
That's crazy. I mean, it's good to know, I guess, what's happening. Because, like, I would only see, like, glimpses of it.
Yeah.
All I would see was, like, this game's a mess, or these glitches are ridiculous. But then I feel like people were still playing it.
Yep.
I don't know if it was because people wanted to, like, see it for themselves type of a thing, or if they had already gotten it.
I think there's a lot of that. Because some people... that's another thing I noticed. People really... Like, I kind of filtered out the half of the... discourse where people were in support of how the release happened, just because the people that I tend to interact with and the perspective I tend to funnel myself towards is a certain way.
Yeah.
But I have noticed a lot of people saying things like, well, this is just how businesses run, or I just want the game now, I don't care. Like the best way that I've heard it put is that gamers are the worst consumer to have to like service, because they'll demand everything from you and they just have like this kind of entitlement almost.
Yeah. That's dumb. Why would you want the game if it's not even like playable?
I don't know. It's playable.
Like, what do you... It's not playable the way it's meant to be, though.
Yeah, I think people who do things like that, in their minds, they're not thinking of it like that. I don't think that they're thinking, I don't care if it's finished, I want it now. I think they're thinking, there's no reason it shouldn't be finished finish it and get it to me now. It's like there's a certain type of personality who believes that, like, it's almost like if someone tells them I can't do it in this amount of time, they don't hear it's not possible. They hear I don't want to work hard enough to make it happen.
Right. Assholes, basically.
Yeah, basically. So yeah, that's my assessment of Cyberpunk. So I guess we're gonna go ahead and take ourselves off the air.
Oh, we're on air. Okay. And I hope you, I don't know, come back and listen again. Next episode will be completely different.
Likely, yeah. It's probably gonna be like that for a while.
Yeah.
All right, so that's us on our way out.
Yeah.